So welcome back, everyone, to Cloud and 5G Live. Next up, we have a fireside chat about critical environments. And first up on stage is Tony Grayson, General Manager of Compass Datacenters. Easy for me to say. Tony is the General Manager of Compass Quantum and is known as a cloud and data center leader throughout the industry. Mr. Grayson regularly speaks and writes on topics ranging from sustainability to energy to data centers to the edge. Before joining Compass, Tony was at SVP at Oracle, where he was responsible for their physical infrastructure and regions. Before Oracle, Mr. Grayson held senior positions with AWS and Facebook. Before embarking on his data center career, Tony served for 20 years in the United States Navy in multiple places, including commanding officer of the USS Providence. Mr. Grayson is a winner of the prestigious VADM James Bond Stockdale Award. I'm sure it's not that James Bond, but it sounds amazing, for inspirational leadership. So if you'd like to welcome to the stage, please, Tony Grayson.
I think I'm left. Am I left?
You can be whichever side you want.
All right. I'll stay right here then.
Excellent. And next up, we have David Watkins, Solutions Director for VIRTUS Datacenters. David heads up the solutions team at VIRTUS Datacenters, working with customers to provide customized solutions. He has been at VIRTUS since 2009, where he was previously head of operations. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, please, David Watkins. Take a seat, gentlemen. So much like the panel discussions, we'll have time for some Q&As at the end. But first up, this is going to be primarily between yourselves, and I'll just be here moderating. So for Tony, can you just explain what a critical environment is and why they're necessary?
So a critical environment is you can call it, if you want to look at like an energy environment or a business environment where you have to maintain a certain amount of uptime because you have mission critical workloads, whether it's telecom or infrastructure running on it. And it's important to maintain it because if you don't, then things break, whether it's a business or cities or anything else like that. That was a horrible definition, but
I'm sure we'll get deeper into it. David, in terms of like the investment, why is investing in a good infrastructure for critical environment so important?
It's really to support what Tony was describing. The good thing about the data center industry is we support so many different industry verticals, and everyone's got an important environment, but they can all live within a data center. And it's all about being on all the time. If I'm showing customers around, I'll normally use the analogy that it's a super well-connected fridge. And it's very much like a fridge, because when you go and buy it, you take it home, you turn it on, you never turn it off. And if it does go off, the food goes off and people get very upset. And if you think of the environment inside a data center as the food, it's a similar thing.
I like the analogy.
And I'll add on one thing to that. I mean, I think we're in a point now, like maybe 5 years ago, if you had a data center outage, it was fine and no one really cared about it. But if you have an outage now, you are definitely front page of everything. I mean, you can go look at Cloudflare a couple days ago. I mean, you definitely have major effects if you're up the board level talking if you have an outage.
Sure, and just in regards, Tony, to how data centers respond to the ever-increasing need for new infrastructure and safe data handling.
I mean, I think it comes from standardization. You have to have a data center design that is repeatable, so lessons learned that you have in your previous data center, you can bring in your new data center. But I also think you need a software layer that augments the people that you hire, and you don't want to always rely on humans because humans make mistakes. So how much of the software orchestration layer can you kind of bring in? And so I think that's kind of that insatiable growth that we're having right now. And you have companies that are doing it very, very well. Everything's the same. They have that software layer, and you have ones that are kind of haphazardly kind of doing bespoke solutions who do have those kinds of problems. And as someone who came from Oracle when I was buying this stuff, it was a marked difference between the two of them. And sometimes you had to go with the older ones just because we're the only game in town, but you really want to be with the other people who are doing it right.
Thank you. And David, just in regards to the energy crisis, how are data centers ensuring consistency through this, like in terms of?
Well, it's a very detailed planning process. So when we are sourcing either a building or land on which to put a data center, power is absolutely a key thing. And the way it normally works is we would approach not the energy company, the utility company that's doing that, check on the capacity that you need for your building, whether they've got it available on their current infrastructure. Typically they don't, so the way it'll work is you'll request a number of megawatts. They might have the capacity to available on the grid, but not the infrastructure to deliver it to where you want to go. So then you end up paying them lots of millions of pounds to upgrade, reinforce the infrastructure is what they call it, or selling you or getting you to pay for their upgrades is probably the more realistic description. But once you've got that, it's secured. So then it's about making sure, as Tony was saying, that you operate it in a good way. So that when the power's available, it's there. And then, of course, there's the standby element of it. So all of our data centers will have a standby generation capacity. So if the grid's not available, we can run on our own. And what's the big push on that at the moment is, historically, that's always been typically from diesel, sometimes gas generators. But obviously with a focus now on sustainability, whilst we can keep the energy up, no problem at all. We don't want to be, putting loads of generator exhaust into the air over long periods of time. We're quite fortunate in the UK that whilst we're upgrading as we go, our infrastructure generally is very stable. So since the time I've been at VIRTUS, I'm aware of, I think we've had 3 utility incidents across 10 data centers where the utility is not available in 11 years. So it's a very small risk.
Very small amount. Thank you. Just moving towards this, the talk about sustainability, because I know how big a deal this is within the world of data centers. This drive towards net zero, Tony, in terms of how it impacts the quality of the service you can provide. I mean, how does it affect it?
But I think it forces us. It was always diesel generators. The tier 2 diesel generators was always the go standby. And there's things you can do to that, like using biofuel that can remove a lot of that, but they still have a stigma with a lot of the local AHJs and permitting that you see. So we're going to have to figure out new solutions that'll work. But the problem is you're trying to maintain that uptime, that reliability with new solutions. And it's that trade-off. Do I build a data center with a microgrid knowing the customer may not take it and they might want something else specific for it? How do I bring in the natural gas turbines when we really don't know how do they operate at 30, 40 megawatts? So even if you have your own microgrid, do you need a diesel generator backup if you own the utility? All these kind of questions are coming to the forefront right now, but I do think we need to do it and we need to work with the providers. And this is where it's good to see a lot of the data center community where everyone kind of functions independently, but you have groups like iMasons who are doing the climate accords, and Dean paid me to say that, so I feel like I have to at least acknowledge that a little bit, but he didn't. We're all getting together and trying to figure it out together, and I think that's the best way to do it, because there's plenty of business to go around in our space right now, as everyone knows. I think the Switch buyout just kind of showed that. But it's kind of a goal that we all need to aspire to, the sustainability net zero, and we all need to work together to figure out how to do it best. Because if we don't, then we're all going to go off in different directions and have a pretty horrible response, I think.
And I think just to add to that, the standby piece really is the missing piece of the jigsaw. Everything else that we do, we can use renewable energy to power the sites. If we're using chilled water systems, we're not consuming water. We're just using it as a transport medium to keep the data center cool. Microsoft did a test recently where they were testing hydrogen fuel cells as a backup power source, as an alternative. And unquestionably, that technology works. The problem at the moment is it doesn't work at scale. So they did 250 kilowatts in 3 of these units that are about, coincidentally, the same size as 3 standby diesel generators. So they were doing 250 kilowatts, the generators can do 6 megawatts, and that's the difference. Until that technology is available in a form that doesn't take up 3/4 of the space that you've bought to build your data center on, you know, we're going to have to do the best we can with alternative fuels, as Tony described.
And that's a good point with that, you know, because that's also, you need hydrogen. How are you making hydrogen right now? Through carbon-intensive fuel sources until you can actually, it's, you know, it's definitely that technology, but it's the fuel source too. How do you get the sustainable all the way down with your scope 3 with the fuel source as well?
Yeah, exactly. I guess it affects everything throughout this sort of supply chain as well. And in regards to this, this idea of a mission-critical mindset when operating a data center, David, what exactly is that?
It's just about you've got to not really think about what you might be running in the data center and who's dependent on it. You've just got to take the view that we're gonna run it in a way that most importantly is safe to the individuals that are working there, but also that it delivers that continuity and constant continuity of service. You could be running an environment that's forecasting the weather. If the weather forecast's not available, no planes can take off. You could be running medical records that are online in real time in a hospital. There are lots. So it's that kind of thing. So it's things like making sure people are trained appropriately, that they're experienced in the roles that they're doing. You have things like two-person verification. So when you're switching infrastructure, that kind of thing, you don't, as Tony alluded to earlier, as good as people might be, they make mistakes. So you want to strike that balance between using people when you have to intervene, but predominantly just kind of leave it alone and it will run fine as it does. But when you do, make sure you do that. Make sure you do it the same every time. Get it right first time every time. That's the kind of thing that you need to do. It's that almost military approach. I would describe.
I definitely 100% agree with that. And I think we need to do I think the biggest threat to mission critical right now, to be honest, and I'd love your opinion on this too, it's the people. Like we're building data centers at such a rate, we can't get the people coming into our industry to help out with that. I mean, there's definitely ways, vets avenues and everything else, but it's this balance of we want to minimize headcount in the data centers, but we want to get people in, and you need to train them, and they're probably going to be a year before they're good. You can't have it both ways. And so I think we, as an industry, need to figure out how to do this entry level, or this entry process of bringing people in to do their apprentice journeyman, and then keep them in, give them pathways to be up for success, because most people don't want to be stagnant in their kind of job. And I think that is really the biggest threat to mission critical. It's the people and finding the right people and bringing them in.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, we've looked at over time. One of the things we have done is started to cast our net a little bit wider, because the data center industry for a long time was a bit of a well-hidden secret, and people didn't understand how many things run within a data center. So I do a lot of work where I liaise with government in our business, and the amount of times we start a meeting off where they'll say, so just talk me through actually what a data center is. But I think we're doing a better job now at raising the profile. But we've been looking at other things, such as looking into other mission critical industries like petrochem and that kind of stuff, because a lot of the skills are transferable. Tony's absolutely right. They need training better, but we need to make it an attractive place that young people want to come and work in and can be successful.
Yeah, it's almost like we've never heard the adage that you hire for attitudes and teach the skills. I'd want to hire the 20 person who's been there 20 years that can do everything. It doesn't happen. They're all taken up right now, or they're retiring.
Yeah, I do a lot of these interviews with the likes of yourselves, of people from the data center world and from the IT environments, and I think really it's effective to tie things to purpose in terms of like, why do you want to do this? And I think it's not uncommon to see, obviously, a lot of people from the military coming into the tech world, for the sense of sort of protecting people and keeping, as you say, mission critical environments up and running. People's lives depend on it, so it has a higher purpose, doesn't it?
No, it does, and especially with the military, but we have to go out and explain the difference on it, because most military, they've been managers since day one. They're not used to just being an individual contributor or just being on that shift lead. We got to show them and tell them that that's okay. I mean, you can have a huge impact on a business if you aren't leading a team of 200. It just doesn't really matter. And then we also have the problem too, I think, or we're going to have it more in the future, is the growing demand for energy is going to start making more, whether they're small modular reactors or more baseload generation. Those are all mission critical too, and people are going to want to do that kind of stuff. So we're going to have to compete, and so that means possibly pay more, better incentives, all that kind of stuff. We're going to definitely. It's not going to be as easy as it used to be.
Any questions from the floor at all for our speakers?
I was going to say, in terms of future-proofing, sustainability, what does the future look like for underwater data centers?
I think they've been trialled and they've been successful, but again, I would just make the comment about scale. So what's been done so far is relatively small. One of our data centers, typically when we build one, probably a minimum of 20 megawatts, and building something of that scale that's submersible would be pretty challenging. I think it's fair to say.
No, I think it's an interesting. The company that did that, I think it was a great example of, how can you run a lights out data center? But we're not dependent on our customers, but that's a customer choice. Can I have a rack go down and not affect the customer? Can I virtualize and kind of spread my availability domains across enough services where they don't have that kind of stuff? But that's not for us to choose. Our choice is really, you want 4 ends or 5 ends? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, and how do we make that happen?
Got a question here, which I guess is relevant in terms of opening up the data center, in terms of what different types of data centers are there? Because I've interviewed someone, for example, from an ag tech company, and they're talking about the fact that the tractors that people are sitting in are basically like mobile data centers, the amount of kind of information that they can consume and interpret. And so I know it's a bit of a wide question, but in terms of the levels, in terms of from small to large, what are we talking about here?
Well, I think what you'll see moving forward is the Internet of Things is what's really fueling the growth. There's lots of things, go back to the fridge analogy. Even now when you go and buy a fridge, some of them are connected to the internet. So many things in your house are connected and therefore need data support. I think now, to get the most efficient, it's a bit of a trade-off. The bigger ones are more efficient, by and large, because you can do that big quantity. It's much more efficient to do that at scale. However, as we move into the future for things like autonomous driving, because if you were sat in the back of a car that's driving itself, you'd want to be pretty confident it's not going to lose its signal. As
it routes back to Ashburn through a network and a bunch of network hops. No, I agree.
Yeah. So you'll see more or a growth in what's called edge data centers. So
you're setting me up great for tomorrow. On my
well, there you go. So these small ones that are tactical, I suppose, tactical but essential, maybe is the way I would describe it.
Yeah, I kind of break them down into 3 things right now. You have your hyperscale data centers, cloud. That's never going to change. It's never going to go away. You have on-prem, and that's kind of never going to go away too. And those are the people that CIOs want to go hug their servers. It's a latency issue. It's a security issue. And then you have everything in between. And I think what we're going to see in the future is this, what is that everything in between? Because, for a data center, I really think you're going to have data centers everywhere. Because a CDN is going to require something different than an IoT, which is going to require something different than autonomous city, which is going to require something different than a smart road. They're all going to require something different. And the problem we're going to wrestle with is, how do we deliver these data centers everywhere? Because it's a totally different concept. So imagine, as a hyperscale data center person, imagine trying to find for one customer 500 sites across the world that are a half acre that have 208 3-phase, that you have fiber within a quarter mile, and it's a very, very different perspective of how we're going to have to be able to deliver that kind of infrastructure. And to be honest, I don't think we as an industry are ready to do that. I think we think we are because we say, hey, come to my retail site, but those retail sites aren't going to work for most of those customers that are developing these platforms right now. So I kind of think that this middle ground that's not on-prem, that's not cloud, we're still going to have to figure that piece out. I don't think anybody's really doing that right now.
It could go many ways. Has anyone got a question? I'll come over to you, Tom, just so you can have the microphone. What are you going to sing for us today?
So yeah, Tony, thank you both for coming today. Great to hear you. But in regards to what's like in the middle, in regards to data centers between the prem and the cloud, I mean, is someone like IBM going to be able to put data centers on a chip? I mean, is that something, in the cloud where it's going to replace the actual facilities?
So, I mean, I think that middle ground will never replace all the facilities. And I do think people are going to think of ingenious ways to deploy that. It could be on mobile, like media and entertainment. If I'm filming a movie, I might want to do on-site generation because you want to bring the compute to where the data is. So I do think there's going to be unique ways that we're going to have to figure out how to fill these platforms. And it could be IBM, or it could be SAP, or it could be, what we're kind of doing right now. I think it's kind of, open game. But I do think what customers in the end, what they really want is something easy and something that's deployable anywhere. They don't want to worry about, they want to worry about their IP inside. They want to worry about their AI, their HPC, their SD-WAN, their internet exchange. They don't want to worry about all that silly data center stuff. And I do think that's where we're going to have to kind of step up and help with that kind of stuff, or they're not going to be able to deploy.
I think it raises an interesting point about people or brands and these companies sort of knowing what they're good at and sticking to it. And
I mean, there's plenty of companies out there who have been in this business that have failed because they try to do too much. Yeah. You could be a data center company, but it's tough to be a data center company, a network company, a cybersecurity company, a virtualized compute, a bare metal company. There are some out there and they're doing it great, but most of us it's tough to just manage one line of business as opposed to a bunch of other line of business.
I always say to people when we're showing them around that, ironically, we don't do IT. So we did
Yep.
We'll leave that to you guys, and you manage your applications in the best way you can because you're the expert at that, but you're not the expert in running a data center.
Yep.
Leave that to us.
Yep, and that's where these partnerships matter. I mean, you will start to see these partnerships come up, where a compute team gets with a SD-WAN team, with cybersecurity that gets with a data center team, and they provide a solution to whatever is needed out there instead of us trying to go by themselves. At least that's the way I kind of see it going. Trust me, I would love to be in a business where I could do all that cool stuff. In the end, though, it's just, you got to stick with one thing, stick with what you're good at, I think.
just to sort of on that topic, in regards to sort of the services that you both provide within your sort of individual organisations, can you sort of summarise your sort of speciality and kind of what makes you sort of unique and different in your markets in terms of like how you do things? And I guess you sort of,
We like to describe it as we build the best data centers so our customers don't have to. That's kind of what we'll say to them. But it's a pretty simple product set. It's space, power, cooling, and the secure environment in which to do it. If at the very top level, it's for people just want to make sure that it works, which is where the power and the cooling side comes from it, and the secure piece is because it's not the equipment necessarily, it's the data that's the value. And especially on the hyperscale side, people are absolutely paranoid about the security of their customers' data. You want to make sure that your bank account details aren't floating around in the internet somewhere where people can get them that they shouldn't do. So it's about being consistent. It's about doing that thing, and it's about doing it again and again and again and again, and doing it right and building that reputation that people have got the confidence in you. Because ultimately, you can't beat the physics. You call it one way, you power it one way. We both do it the same way in our respective sites. It's about building that reputation that they're confident if they come to you, their service is safe.
Yep. I would look at, kind of our line of business right now, and this, I guess, we're talking the Compass parent company, it's a switch to a manufacturing discussion than a construction discussion. Because in manufacturing, you can pre-build and bring everything together. And what a platform wants right now, it's quick time to market. And so it's how do you change that kind of construction into a manufacturing where you're just jigsaw piecing together. You can deliver 20 megawatt data center in, let's say, 6 months. And then how do you make that repeatable so any lessons learned that you have on there, you can roll into it. But then how do you make the design fungible enough that you can provide that mass customization? So if I want a 48-inch rack, I can do that. If I want, water cooling, which we can spend an hour on that one too, or liquid cooling, then we can do that kind of stuff. And so I think you need that mass customization, but it needs to be at a low cost too. So it's kind of like you need to kind of figure out how to do the best of all worlds. Low cost, simple, mass customization, quick time to delivery. And that's kind of, it's a different way to think about, I think, the problem that I've seen in the past where it's just been, I'm going to build this data center specifically for the customer.
No, thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Okay, I've got one myself, actually. Just in regards to the future, over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, what kind of projects are you both working on at the moment that you're excited about, that are getting the juices flowing and kind of making it enjoyable to come into work each day?
At the moment, we're we're solely UK-based organisation, but we are now actively looking to expand into Europe. So that's going to be the thing for us, which, whilst the end product that we'll be delivering will be the same, there's going to be a lot of different nuances in how you operate in different geographies, the permits you need, that kind of stuff. So that's going to be pretty exciting for us, I think, over the next few years.
Any particular regions that you might sort of...
We're out surveying at the moment, let's say, but it'll be
nice try.
It'll be in Europe, and we're looking at some of the emerging markets. I think it's fair to say is where we'll be.
Are there any markets in Europe that you categorically wouldn't go anywhere near because they are saturated?
Well, I think there are some where you can't actually.
You can, yeah.
Because it's like tied to the state?
There's no
moratoriums. No more power.
No more power. So Dublin is struggling. Amsterdam put a moratorium in recently where they said no more data centres. Yep. So they've tried to then start moving outside of Amsterdam, and the local government there have also said no, not here. So we are, the constraints that Tony was alluding to earlier around the infrastructure, we are actually seeing that happen now in real time in some countries where they say, you're not saying none in the country, but they might say none here, and so that's going to drive secondary markets in those.
And you can't even bring your own power in some of these locations. There's companies that are trying to bring, gas gens in the 20, 30 megawatts, but the government right now, data centers have such a bad stigma. They're the parasite. They come in, they take all the land, they take all the power, they take all the water, and they give you like one job. And so, and we also get a bunch of tax breaks too. So, I do think there are some places that just don't. We're gonna have to work better and give back to more of the community to make it more sense with that baseload generation or whatever we're doing with kind of, more jobs, all that kind of stuff.
I don't know whether I've imagined this or whether this is actually a thing, so forgive me if I've imagined it. But is it possible to have data center sites potentially under the sea in terms of like the cooling process and stuff?
It's possible. It's been done, but again, it's not on scale.
I think that comes down to the lights out, which comes down to the mission critical, which comes down to how a company orchestrates their workload. And so you might have to have 5x the amount of servers to get that kind of utilization. Anything's possible out there, I can imagine. But I think it'd be interesting.
I just wonder, if that environment has to get more creative with where it puts its...
So I definitely think we need to get more creative, and I think we need to give more back to the community, whether it's waste heat generation, whether it's I'm going to build a plant and I'm going to take half and give you a half of of the base load. I think we need to do a much better job of integrating with the community, integrating with the country, and do a more philanthropic kind of things instead of just building a data center.
Okay, and any more questions before we wrap up? No, just one more thing. Just in regards to the technologies that you're working with, if you had to pick one that's really going to be the most impactful over the next couple of years in your realm, will it be sort of the edge and edge compute and that kind of thing, or sort of what's going to be the standout?
I mean, I think the edge is interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow. But I think that's not really new technology. That's just finding a new way to deploy a small data center anywhere where you want it. I do think the technology that's going to be interesting is kind of what is going to enable us to really control that scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Are we going to bring modular reactors? Are we going to pair them with data centers? Are we going to develop better microgrids? Are we going to bring down the cost of solid oxide fuel cells or PEM fuel cells down so it's something reasonable? I think that kind of technology is really going to kind of help us out. But I also think I'm starting to see some pretty cool stuff. I mean, I know it's not a hugely sexy software business, but DCM, BMS systems that can kind of give you that kind of warnings that, augments, kind of the technicians, even virtual stuff where you can actually walk around in a helmet in a construction area and see all the deconflictions, like, that structural person put something where a pipe's supposed to be, like all that stuff that just makes it easier for us to kind of do our job. I see a lot of, advantage for looking at that kind of stuff.
Amazing. Well, I think you've definitely made data centers extremely interesting, which is commendable. So thank you very much.
Well, yes, I know.
Well done.
I don't think I've ever really heard that comment before. Make data centers interesting.
We try and do the same in Data Center Magazine, of course, as well. So, no, thank you very much, Tony and David. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.